Hi, guys. This is the first of a series of interviews I'm going to do with Eric, FM8. If you're a parent, you don't want to miss this first interview. In this first part, we talk about how his journey to discovering how the world really works started 19 years ago with the birth of his son, who was immediately hurt by the medical hell system. And Eric acted like a real man should, and he went balls to the walls against the system. He doesn't take no for an answer, and he will do whatever it takes to find a solution. I had contacted Eric a while back to ask questions about the anti-nano devices. And I mentioned the work I was doing with live blood microscopy, etc. And he really motivated me to make a video about it right away. Eric is a rare individual in many ways. And I wish there would be a lot more people like that, because we wouldn't be in trouble like we are now. Trust me. You immediately feel with him that there's no bullshit. And he has no problem getting down and dirty and getting shit done. Like, that's the kind of guy you want on your team. And in this interview, he's pretty serious because it's a serious matter. But I can't tell you how much of a laugh I have with Eric every time we talk. Like, he's got an ever-present sense of humor. And, because we don't talk about baseball, here's the interview. Enjoy. So I'm going to start with asking him, because I think that the moment that really changed things for him is when his son was born 19 years ago. And now I'll let Eric talk.
Oh, yeah. When your birth of your first child, which was my son, who was 19 years old, when that moment only brings to your life the joy first, because you see your son. But then when you see somebody that's your son, from that point forward, only suffer for the vast majority of his first years. Suffering, suffering, suffering. The only thing that really got me through the majority of that time is that he always had this most delightful, what some would say like an angelic smile. But zero energy, no strength to do anything. So like literally you could see like this is a little toy truck. I would watch my son when he got home. He was in the hospital for a long time, his first few weeks of life. But when he was able to start moving around a little bit, and he wasn't moving around a whole lot at all, and playing with things, he would be laying on the floor on his chest, just pushing a little car or truck around, smiling. That was his whole life. And I was not satisfied with that. And that was the beginning of what I would say was my troubles. Because what I started to find out is how weaponized everything can be or will become. My family became weaponized against me because I wasn't satisfied with my son laying on the floor on his chest and only had enough strength to have his head tilted on the floor and watch this car with one hand. He couldn't have enough strength to use his other hand.
Whoa.
He was that weak all the time. So I was not satisfied with that. And of course, this is when you started looking into the components of things. What was your child exposed to day one? Right. And then you start looking at these things, and again, it's kind of overwhelming how you don't look at that first 20 to 30 minutes of his life, which he was injected with 5 injections. It took me a long time to really come back and look at that moment in time.
5 injections?
That's kind of somewhere between 3 to 5 is typical in the United States.
Within a half an hour of his birth?
Yeah, that's what the receiving nurses do. They're like vultures. The receiving nurses are like, this is another way, when you look back now retrospectively, I see the receiving nurses, the nursery nurses, as vultures for the system. Literally, they're like this. They want to strip the child. And I also saw this in my when I was going through paramedic school, when I went through the OB rotation. when I was going through the OB rotation, I'd watch these nursery receiving nurses. They want to strip that child away from their mother as fast as lightning so they can do all their witchcraft over your child.
What did they inject?
Vaccines, the Hep B, and then a whole bunch, whatever is on the schedule. It could be anywhere between, depending on state to state, it's all different. It could be 2, it could be 1, it could be 3, it could be 5. It's all over the place. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's all based on what your state has deemed necessary for your area. But I was never satisfied with my son being that way. But the funny thing is, it took me a long time. It's not funny, but it took me a long time to actually look at these injections because of the stigma that I saw the world put on people who looked at these things. So I just didn't look at it. I was like, well, this must be the most figured out thing on earth, that like they really had people. We got this figured out so much, there's no need for you to look at it. Don't look at this. So I didn't. And so what I did notice, though, like, because I wasn't satisfied with him being that way, I just started researching, and what they were deemed, because they tagged him with failure to thrive. Because they tagged him with that failure to thrive, like they don't know.
No.
It's just one of these generic terms they can just put on you. And just like for fibromyalgia, it's a generic term saying you have chronic idiopathic pain. They don't know where it comes from, blah, blah, blah. Right? Fibromyalgia. Right. And so with my son, I'm constantly digging at all these things. They started rolling in the supplements, rolling in this, rolling in that. And I'm sitting there looking at all these things and looking at, and took a long time for me to, because again, before my son was born, I just wasn't that guy. I didn't look at anything. I didn't care to look at anything. I was a guy who was really getting into all my TV shows, my football games, my basketball game, baseball. That's all I cared about. I didn't really care about a whole bunch of anything. Going out to eat every Friday night, Saturday night, or whatever, that's all that mattered to me. And that was my world leading up to that. And so I knew that I was short in knowledge. Like I really had to work on my knowledge base to put a foundation under me. And shortly after my son was born, my fire department that I worked for at the time offered their first paramedic program. And so I was like, okay, this will be a very good thing to get under my feet, to give me a foundation of what is medicine, so-called medicine.
You were a
Firefighter, yep. Okay. So I was a firefighter from the day my son was born. I was actually, the day my son was born, I hadn't even finished the fire academy yet. Hadn't even quite finished. We were at the very end, right before we were going to graduate. So I actually missed one class while I was in the fire academy, and went back later and got that. But not being satisfied, later on, the department offered me to go to paramedic school. Went to paramedic school to get this foundation under me, and then I started being able to, for some reason, out of the blue, because this program that I went through was like, they literally were trying to put street paramedic detectives. That's what they were trying to put on the street, was paramedic detectives, and not your average paramedic. So they had a very stringent, rigorous program with like a 80 to 90% failure rate. That's how they didn't care about all that other fluff. The funny thing is, they do now, because behavioral is the only gauge. As long as you do what the protocol says, you're fine, right? So that's what they're breeding. They're breeding a society of people and medicine or paramedics out there on the street that only do the protocol. So that's the most dangerous thing in the world. That's not what our program I went through taught you, how to make assessment-based decisions on what you're seeing, you're finding, and what is the best route to get this person going in the right direction. That's what they put out, and that's why they didn't care about the failure rate. They saw the failure rate as a success rate. That's how they saw it. Yeah, first test had like almost 50 people in our class. after like you had to maintain the 85 to 85 in your average. That had to be your average. You couldn't, with an exam, you couldn't score lower than 85, you're gone. And so there was like 7 people left after the first exam in the whole class. Everybody else was gone. Just like that. And by the time we got to the end, there was only 5 of us left.
Wow. So that training basically, so you train to be a firefighter, and then you work as a firefighter, but basically that training is basically would be like someone who works in an ambulance, like you would be like you'd have like both together.
Yeah. In the United States, most fire departments are what you call cross-trained. They do both, but not every firefighter is a paramedic. Throughout the United States, at minimum, most firefighters are at minimum at least an EMT, and that's like a 3-week program. Most paramedic schooling, at least until not too long ago, was like literally like an associate's degree.
Right. Can you say what EMT is?
An EMT just is a emergency medical technician, basically somebody who could take your blood pressure and take vitals, really, and maybe if your arm is broke or something like that. Very, very minimal in skill and assessment ability. Like they're if you're having a difficulty breathing or a critical moment, most likely they're not going to be able to help you.
Okay.
Because they don't have a whole lot of skill sets that they can pull from.
Right. It's
not making a hit at them or anything. It's just that, like, I mean, how much can you learn in a 3-week program? You know what I mean? Not a whole lot.
Yeah.
And so their biggest things is basically helping and assisting with CPR and stuff like that, or cardiac arrest. They can do all those things that, you know. So getting back to my son and not being satisfied and happy, or just taking that this is his life. And when I started studying and learning and picking apart all the stuff, more of my troubles came with my family. They're like, why are you so obsessed with this? They would say that I'm obsessed. You have this addictive behavior about you. This is so, you're so addictive to things like that. And all they were pointing back was, like, in my younger years leading up to being married, like, I guess you would say I did have an addictive nature about me, about, you know, women in general. I was one of those guys. And so all they did was they were just pointing back at my old way of how I had that type of addiction. And now they're calling this an addiction too, because I just wasn't satisfied or complacent with what my son was going through. And so I kept learning, digging, and pulling apart these medicines that need these supplements. And that's why a lot of people who, especially if they're on my Telegram channel, they know that I'm not a big fan of almost any supplements, because you have to see what they extract that so-called material. We'll just say vitamin A. Where do they extract that vitamin A? Where do they extract that vitamin B? And once you start looking at where they extract these things and what they actually are, it's eye-opening. A lot of these things are unclean. They're unclean. Well, to me, this is my opinion based on my faith. This is not anybody else's faith. It could be, but this is how I see things. This is not like, I'm not trying to, you should do this, you should do that. This is me. This is my house, my family, not yours. And so once I started looking at the majority of these vitamins and supplements and things are extracted from a lot of unclean animals, which would be unclean, I would consider unclean. And I'm like, wow, that's where they get these hormones from. You think a lot of these they claim that a lot of these extractions are from plants. Some of them are, but you have to look. You have to source every single supplement, vitamin, and what you'll see is they'll have a tier drop down, and they'll have 3 selections from their sources, and 2 may very well be plant-based from the same manufacturer. The same manufacturer could have 3 different sources, and one of them could be an animal, and 2 of them could be. So at any given time, depending on availability of sources, right, you don't know. They don't tell you. They don't tell you, hey, well, this is the porcupine hormone, or this is the you know what I mean? Or you know, the lilac or whatever plant. It doesn't matter. Like they're not going to tell you that. They just tell you what their sources are. And so whenever I do my research and I see where these components are derived from or where they're extracted from, if that manufacturer has one source, it doesn't matter. If it has one source that comes from an unclean animal, I say no, because you don't never know. You don't never know if you're ever going to, you know, hit the jackpot, right? And get that animal injected into your, ingest that animal for you. In my faith, right, for the faith that I walk in, I don't want that. So I steer clear of that. Again, this isn't for everybody. This is just my journey with my family and what I believe.
Yep. Yep.
And so this was really like starting to really shake like my whole world when I started presenting this stuff to my family and stuff like that. And that's when I started looking at the food that we eat. You know, and I was one of the most gluttonous people. Like before my son was born, man, Wendy's, McDonald's, it didn't matter. All of that. That was just a regular lunch. That was just lunch. Fast food was just, that's what the world, the American the typical American just considers lunch is all that, right?
Yeah.
And then I was one of them, like for years. And well, years and years after I got out of high school and everything. But I kept looking, kept digging, and I'm looking at everything in my house. Everything in my house. I read the labels, and I started reading components. You know, I don't call ingredients. I don't call if you watch my channel, to me, everything is a component.
Yeah.
Not an ingredient, because these aren't ingredients. Most of those things that we're dealing with components. We're not dealing with ingredients anymore. Ingredients was something what our grandparents dealt with. We're not dealing with ingredients anymore. We're dealing with components. Yeah. And that's where I learned that a lot of these things, they're even then, when my son was first born,
20 years ago almost.
Yeah, I was seeing that these are almost machine-like particles that are integrated into our food, into our beverages, into, you know, these supplements, these so-called supplements. And I was like, that just doesn't make sense. The way I'm reading it, that especially when you start reading that even back then, like how a lot of these things could be manipulated before or after ingestion. Right. And that's what I'm talking about, this one particle that they add in there.
Yep.
It doesn't say that's what the whole thing is doing, but I'm looking at components and particles that they say that they put in there themselves, how they could be manipulated through some type of electromagnetic phenomenon.
Wow.
So we're like, so this is where I got really big into understanding what is safe around my son, because I started seeing, because I it's like as soon as I learned that a lot of the things that he was taking could interfere with his health based on the toxicology reports that I was reading on that one component by itself was toxic. And then how you can't put a recipe together of anything where the bulk of the individual components themselves are toxic to a person. You can't make something that's all toxic good. You just can't do that.
Can't do that.
You just can't. But that's what we're dealing with. Yeah. And because I started seeing all these things, it's like, I don't want to put aluminum paint in my son. There's, you know, what they call aluminum lake blue, aluminum lake yellow. Like literally, it tells you it's an aluminum lake. FD&C yellow or FD&C green, or what, all these different colors. At the end of the day, once you start looking these things up, metal flake paint. That's literally metal flake paint. So the same paint that goes on your car goes on your medicine.
Looks great on the Camaro 69, but not.
Yeah, exactly. but that's what we're dealing with, and that's what I was dealing with. I was like, wow, he's literally getting poisoned to death.
Wow.
And so we were sent home with all these supplements and all these things, and like I literally saw him begin to really have this failure to thrive every day. Every day, to me, he got observably weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker.
Over a period of how much time are you talking?
So from the time he was born, probably all the way up to somewhere between 3 or 4, like he literally survived that time frame. He survived it. He was just a survivor. Even though, because our family, we were literally just taking him up to these white robe priests and just do what you will. And that's what they did. They did exactly what they wanted to do to him, and they didn't care. They're heartless.
Right.
And a lot of people say, well, Eric, you're just being too hard. No, they're heartless beings. And
they're headless too.
Yeah,
headless.
well, what I'm about to get to is the story where I could tell you that they are profoundly heartless. And then it also showed me how heartless my family was to me for being who I am. So I set up a meeting, and it took probably every bit of 3+ months to get his panel of physicians, his specialists that he saw at this children's hospital. It probably took almost maybe 3 months to get them to agree to sit in front of me. And by this time, I'm already a paramedic. Got about a year or 2 under my belt, but still always reading all their so-called papers that they're supposed to be reading and try to understand it, and picking apart their papers that they're supposed to be reading and understanding, and seeing that most of that is garbage, like almost all that. So the whole peer review system, I was learning through my own studies, is, you didn't have all this information on YouTube back then, when I was actually having to read documents and documents and documents.
Right.
And so that's why it was getting more and more difficult for me to talk to anybody about what's really going on, because most people don't put this type of time in to read that type of documentation, because it sucks. It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's a lonely life. It was very lonely. And nobody's going to help you. Nobody.
Right.
And so by the time I got this panel of physicians, it was like 20 some specialists.
20 people?
Yeah, well, the specialists and like their assistants or whatever. So it was like 20 some people I was sitting in front of. But like every single childhood specialist that actually is a specialist in a hospital, he was seeing them.
He was what? He was seeing, really?
Oh, he was seeing almost every single specialist in the cascade of specialists. Right there, he was seeing almost all of them, and almost all of them had something to contribute, right, for something that he needed to take, some type of medications. His medications back then was costing our family about $2,000 a month in co-payments. Yeah, $2,000 in payments and co-payments. That he was taking that much, and some of them were just.
And you had insurance, I guess. I assume you had insurance.
Yeah, that's with insurance.
Wow.
That's with insurance. And so this, I was having to work more overtime and work other jobs, and still try to study as much as I could everywhere I was going. So I was studying all the time, and I got in front of them, talking to them, and I laid out all these supplements, the information, and with each supplement or medication underneath it, I had broke down what the toxic effects were of each individual component of every single supplement or drug,
which they never looked at before, or it just passed.
They're not trained to do that. They're not trained to do that. They don't have to do that because it's regulated, right? It's okay. It's got the green light. That's all that matters to these people, is if it's got the green light, it doesn't matter what's in it. It could literally say rat poison. It's got the green light.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
It does. It is rat poison, and it's got the green light.
Oh, actually, yes. Some of these blood thinners are actually based on the same science of rat poison. Same science. Same exact science.
Well,
but I'm talking to all these people, and I show them every step by step, every single thing. And so whichever physician subscribed or prescribed that medication or supplement to them, I would speak to them directly. Boom, 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 around the whole room. There wasn't much arguing there. They didn't really fight me at all. They were just kind of like this. And then the lady that was in charge of his care was a gastrointestinal doctor. Sweet lady, the only woman or the only physician that actually would listen with an ear. But still, you could see that she had conflict, and it was conflict in her mind. But the only reason she would listen the most is because she also had a child that was a little bit older than him that had similar issues, not the same, but similar issues. And she was doing the same treatment that she had set for him for her child. Same exact treatment, same regimen. Just not in the same GI regimen, not necessarily the rest of what he had going on, because he had way more going on in her child. And so this is what messed her up. This is what broke her from her programming when I got to the what she prescribed to my son, because it's the same thing she prescribed to her child. But she didn't, but her colleague did, right? And when she heard me break every single thing down, how it poisons you, what would be the outward expression of this poisoning, right? She just fell down on the table. Like, she just fell down on the table and she started crying and bawling her eyes out. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Because when she saw it because she was sitting right beside me. And so I just slid the papers over to her and I spread it out, and she saw it. And so it was like one of those things, once you see, you can't unsee. And then she goes, and she was the last one I talked to. And I saved that one for last, because what she heard is she heard that I had my act together, and none of her colleagues none of them put up an argument. Not at all. When you come to these people with that type of information, that level of information, they're not going to fight you on it. They'll just do what my friend Nathan says often, is that you'll get this conspiracy of silence, right? And that's what the whole world is this everything that we've been through the last 3 years. That's what we're dealing with. Is we're dealing with a multitude of people who have allowed policies and procedures to be implemented against our brothers and sisters to implement a silent civil war, where brother against brother, sister against sister, mother against mother, father against father. That's what we have done. This conspiracy of silence to put forth the law, the regulation, the policy, the protocol comes before you and me and your brother and your sister. Yeah. That is kind of what I've been dealing with for a very long time. Is this silent civil war that we were in. We've been in a silent civil war for a very long time, brother. Let me tell you, I've seen it. It took me a while to wake up to this, even though as a paramedic, I was pronouncing children dead left and right. Children left and right. You're not supposed to be pronouncing children dead left and right, not pronouncing them dead. And our paperwork was very clear. You had to have these benchmarks to pronounce anybody under the age of 10 dead. The first check mark, injection between 24 to 72 hours. That was a requirement. Like if they didn't have an injection between 24 to 72 hours, you had to work them. So that's the first check.
You have to work them?
Cardiac arrest. Like you had to, regardless, if you came and found a child that had rigor mortis, right, blue, you still had to perform advanced life support, or what we call in the United States ACLS treatment or PALS treatment, which is pediatric advanced life support. And so you had to work them. But the first checkbox and the requirement to be able to pronounce a child dead, DOA, dead on arrival, at this time was an ejection between 24 and 72 hours, which they removed sometime before 2017. They removed that. They just stricken it from the documents or whatever, like it never existed. And almost like the whole world was prepping for something to come. And so when you see that type of thing with children, and this is why I don't have a whole lot of heart or compassion for what's going on right now, because this has been our life for a very long time. And there's so many parents out there who have been destroyed by this. And most of them are the poor. Most of them are the poor because they are mandated to get these things to get their handouts.
Right.
So most people aren't going to hear the story from the poor. You know what I mean? They don't care. They don't care. But those who are of so-called wealth, middle class folk, they have seen oftentimes something else. They have seen the loss of milestones, verbal to nonverbal, right? Walking to all of a sudden they can't walk anymore, or they can't walk with balance. All these little things add up. And as I was growing up, I remember that I don't remember seeing one child in my school that was afflicted. I mean, like you would see this random one handicapped child in a whole school. And even by the time I got to high school, you may see two handicapped children.
Yeah, I don't even remember anything from my high school at all. No, but
Yeah.
but it was healthy.
And then then you get to the point where you're as a parent. Now I'm a parent of a special needs child. And we go to the playgrounds and stuff like that. And all you hear now, instead of you're hearing about the parents talking about their child's activities, whether it be dance or football, baseball, basketball, or whatever, piano, guitar, what most parents are talking about today is the news from their last visit to their specialist that they go to. That's what parents are talking about today. And we, as a society, because we're so detached from each other, we just focus on our doorstep. That's all that most people focus on, is their doorstep, and they don't look out their door and see what all is going on, because they only care about the individual, the house, like your home. If my house isn't affected, then we're good. Everything is good. You just had a bad day or a bad week or a bad year or whatever. It didn't affect me, so whatever. That's unfortunate. That's kind of where we're at. But that doctor, getting back to the doctor, what she did was she left that practice. That was her practice.
Wow.
It was her practice. And once she saw what she saw, and then she tried to talk to her colleagues about what they all were doing. She went in, because she was actually way up there. She was like senior partner. Like she was the boss over a lot of these people. And when she started to contend with them and confront them with what I presented, they started to ridicule her. They started to call her crazy. Right. They did no longer let her participate in any of their reindeer games, kind of thing. That's what was happening. Wow. And so she ended up moving like out northwest somewhere, and she started her own practice by herself and all that kind of stuff. And she thanked me for, opening her eyes up to this. And she said, I'm sorry. She said, I now know when I leave here now, I know that you're going to be safer than anybody else. But I'm sorry that I'm leaving you to these pack of wolves. And that's what she said. It's because they don't want to hear it. Because everything they're doing to your child is putting additional funds in their pocket. Everything. Every single thing they do to your child, regardless if it's an injection or not, doesn't matter. Every single thing they do to your child puts more additional funds in their pocket, whether it's helping your child or not. So that was like the biggest beginnings of, I mean, there was a whole lot of things that went in between there. But like right before, like actually with my wife at the time, before I went in there to talk to those specialists, this is somewhere closely around the time where the marriage ended, even though I continued the marriage. But my relationship with that woman that called her my wife, that I called my wife, she told me, and her family told me, that what's going to happen today, if you get your way, if I get my way, you'll be the death of our son. That's what they told me. I would be the death of my son. The little boy who's sitting there playing with a truck, a little car,
with his head like this,
just laying on the floor, lifeless, could only put up enough energy just to move his hand in that car and smile, and smiled. So, and when I present it to the doctor, I said, here it is. She cried again. And then she says, what would you like us to do? What do you think would be the best thing for us to do right now? I said, okay, I want you to run this full spectrum, broad spectrum toxicology report. I want the broadest spectrum toxicology report that you can get on them. And I said, and you're all paying for it. And so they did. They ran it, and he was like slowly drifting off into a kidney failure, one, and then other, like he could have easily gone into multi-system organ failure easily, and then obviously slipped away from us. And so I presented this to my wife and her family. Didn't mean anything to them. Didn't mean nothing to them. Nothing. I was a problem. I was going to be harmful to my son. I was the problem.
Right.
And because I was a paramedic, you just think you're too smart for everybody. That's what I was always getting. Like, I always went too far. I'm always the guy that goes too far. That's what even my so-called peers in the fire department, you just take things too far, Eric. Again, when you start to see how the world is basically weaponized through programming, again, we return you to your regular scheduled program. That is the world. That is the majority of the people around you who can't see and will never see, because they're programmed not to see only what their taskmasters show them. If their taskmaster doesn't show them, then they can't see it.
Yeah.
Of course, that taskmaster is that television.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I was just reflecting this week. I was thinking about that. Apparently we see now that's from probably 10, 15 years ago. I heard that every day you see about 100 commercials, propaganda, whatever. That means that by age 30, you got a million pieces of propaganda just flowing through you, man. Like, people don't have their own thoughts. We're completely brainwashed like automatons.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably an understatement. That's probably shortchanging you. I think it would probably be more than that, really.
Yes.
Even if you listen to the music, a lot of our music actually has bits and pieces of hidden or subtle propaganda in them.
Right. And not only that, you know what? I went to I go shop for clothes maybe once a year. I go to a place, I get 20 t-shirt, 20 pair of pants. I go and I try them for like an hour. And I had to be stuck under a speaker in the mall. Usually when I do that, I bring my earplugs because I can't stand that stupid music that they play in there. There's something about it, I just can't stand it. And then I get there, and when I came out, I was sick for 3 hours. But not because I wasn't just not the it was not the air, it's not that. I'm never nauseous. I'm never ever nauseous in my life. Doesn't matter what I eat, it's not that that's not happened to me. I was just nauseous for 3 hours. And it is the music. I don't know what they're doing, man, and that stuff, but
Right. Yeah. It's a it's a thing.
it's a thing. It's a
It's a
that.
thing. It's a thing. That's for sure.
So yeah, so all this shit happened, and then so you got on that path, and then you got the toxicology test, and what was the result?
Oh, we need to take him off of, he was basically somewhere between 20 to 25 medications, compounds, and supplements. And so they took him all the way down from 20 to 25 down to 1.
Wow.
And the only one they couldn't take him off of was a prednisone. And I'm here to tell you, folks, prednisone is the hardest, most addictive. The reason it's the most addictive because it literally, especially what I've learned with synthetics in general, how it basically literally controls a part of your body. That's what it does. You have to look at it as a control mechanism because that's what it is. And once your body has become dependent and addicted to that synthetic biological component to control, it's more than controlling you, really. Like if we look at our hormone cortisol, it's not producing cortisol for you. It's giving you this mimetic technology that is cortisol like.
Right. Right.
And because they have learned how to fashion things in our lock and key system, because everything about us is we're all locking, everything in our body is this lock and key thing.
Right.
And what they're trying to do with these synthetic components is they're trying to unlock all the locks and open all the doors for what is about to come. In my faith and in my understanding, I think that's what the synthetic movement, with every little peripheral, there's lots of peripheral puzzle pieces here. But at the end of the day, the synthetic biological movement is the key to unlock all these doors, to allow, whenever you open a door, you're letting something in. That's what I am seeing, and that's what I am understanding with everything that is going on today.
Right.
Because I've been seeing what this stuff has been doing to people. I've seen what this has done to children. And if we look at scripture and we looked at where the Messiah walked, everywhere he walked, the people were afflicted with so many different diseases. And again, because what this synthetic biology or this syntech is doing to all of us is allowing the afflictors to come in and to rain down on us afflictions. And it's all about trying to just separate yourself from this wicked system and get further and further away as much as you can, so you can keep the ways of Egypt. That's all it is. It's the oldest way on earth, pretty much, is the ways of Egypt. Keep the ways of Egypt out of us, because that was one of the things that, when the children came out of, when the father's children came out of Egypt, that was one of the things that they were trying to do, was to keep the afflictions, the poisoning of Egypt. You will be safe now from the poisoning of this, you know, that pharaoh, you're a king, you know. And but now what we have done is we don't necessarily see a king or ruler over us. We don't feel that way. We feel free, but because we don't understand the past and the ways of the ancient ways of poisoning and pacifying and basically making men not men. And that's the most important thing you can do, is to sissify men. And that's literally what I've been contending with, are men that's not men, for a long time. I can't talk to a lot of so-called men without them getting emotional, like very emotional, like a child, like a toddler. Most of our men today are toddlers. They can't talk to a man who's going to be straight with them, because I don't beat around the bush a whole lot, and I'm very blunt. Especially, I'm more blunt with men than I am with women. But there are a few women on my channel that will say I'm a little too blunt, but I do it out of love. I do love people a lot. I do have a propensity to love, but sometimes, because of what I've gone through in my life, my BS meter kicks off like really easy, and I'm not made to tolerate this type of stuff. Neither should a lot of us. We shouldn't be tolerating what is going on, especially what has been going on with our children for a very long time. It's insane once you see it. And again, what's going on right now, this day and age, with, you know, the adults, I don't have the heart for it, because years ago I was watching children leave this place at an exponential rate, just leave this place. And some of them will leave this place but still be here. And what I mean by that is that they get something, a physician gives them something, and then they lose their mind because they have some type of event. They have a neurological event where they're no longer themselves. They're lost inside themselves the rest of their days. Or they have this seizure, you know, a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, 3-year-old. Oh, it's just a febrile seizure. It means nothing. Well, where do most febrile seizures come from? Most febrile seizures, and I had the numbers because I had access to our reporting system. I could generate statistical reports on anything you can think of. If I could look at it, especially when we still had that little checkbox, injection 24 to 72 hours, you know, I could pull up reports. How many of those children had seizures 24 to 72 hours? All of them. How many were febrile? All of them. You know, and so this is the type of things that, like, even public safety, I don't have the they're not my brothers and sisters anymore, because again, that term conspiracy of silence, they have seen it for so long. The ER physicians, the ER nurses, they have seen it for so long, but they all, because they want their job, they want to keep the world, but you know, they're keeping the world, but they're concealing the devastation of what they're participating in,
which is obvious these days. Of all, I mean, it's like,
but it's always, and a lot of people don't like to hear this, it's always been that way. But I'm here to tell you, at least for the night, I can testify to the last 19 years, watching what I was contending with the medical establishment, what I was contending with at work, and even in the early days when you would ask a parent, and even your crew members, like when you had to ask these very specific questions when you were about to pronounce a child dead, you were mandated to ask these questions because you had to check that box, right? And then when you go to ask that question, what you get was hatred, enmity. Look up in your scripture where enmity comes from, right? And so, and look, your peers, your crew, your parents, everybody gave you hatred for asking that question. You can ask any other question on the list, but that one question, the first question, is the one that you're always a little nervous to ask because you knew that you were going to get a barrage of hatred from your crew members and from the family. That is inappropriate. You shouldn't ask anything like that. Well, I'm like, well, currently the state is asking me, telling me, mandating me that this is a requirement for my report, you know? And so I was dealing with this stuff for a long time. Most people don't see that. Why? Because 911, first responders, paramedics, we go into the house. Doctors don't go into the house. The newscasters, they don't go in the house, right? None of these people out there in the broad sense of the world, they're not going into people's houses. They're not asking these questions. They're not experiencing real life. They're not, most people will never experience real life and death every day they go to work. That was my job. My job was we were going to experience life and death situations, not necessarily for us, but for people in our community. We were going to experience that. Somewhere in my city, somebody died every day. Every day. And it could be the whole, anywhere, accidents, suicide, children issues, children getting hurt, harmed, or, the worst of the worst for children. It's insane. But because most people, the society, most of our society are concealed from this. They don't see that. They don't experience this. They don't know that is happening all around them every single day. They only hear what is reported on the news for their local area, whatever. In the area, the local news is just handpicked fear porn for the masses. It's handpicked. Yeah. They only going to tell you what they want you to hear that day in that hour, every day. That's how it is. And they're not going to tell you. I mean, they could bombard you. You could be bombarded with tons of fear because you're going to have tons of mayhem all the way around. But they want to make sure the story that they pick actually stirs the most amount of emotion that will cause division. Typically, those are the stories they like to push. Is the divisive stories with tragic endings and all that kind of stuff. That's what they're looking for every day. Is division with tragedy.
And useless. I mean, like I go to the gym and they have this annoying channel where it's like tons of information and it's all dramatic shit that you can't do anything about. Just looking at it, you're like, oh, wow, this killed here, did this accident in China. Well, an accident in China? What? And just to load you up with crap that you can't do anything about. It's disgusting.
Yeah, it's truly insane. But yeah, that is basically the starting part for my life where I woke up and started to become a man. At like 29 years old, I wasn't even a man yet, really. I wasn't. I didn't do man things, But when you have a child that's born and he's weak, you're commanded to protect and guard him. And I fell asleep on the watch for a long time for my son. And that's something I talk to the Father a lot about, is forgive me for sleeping on that watch where I let my son where we basically took our son up to these ritualistic practitioners that don't have your family or your faith, anything about you. Your best interest is not at their heart. Their financial, I don't care what anybody says, their financial interest is where their heart is. And I guarantee you, somebody has a story. Well, I know somebody who, they really love the children. They really love this. Okay. Do they inject your child? If they have one client in their practice and they inject one child, they don't love your child. I don't care. I don't care. That's the way I see it now. I don't, if that's what your practice does, then you hate children. That's the way I look at things now. And that may be extremist or whatever, but we live in very extreme times. And if we don't really guard and protect our family, like the Most High has told us, the Father has told us to protect and guard. Protect and guard.
You didn't say, look at all your sin. I don't even know where to begin. You just said, follow me. Follow me. Foxes have holes and birds have nests. I have nowhere to lay my head, but I'll lead you home. I'll lead you home. It's to follow